them all what I'm made up. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping right into quite a developing situation.
Yeah, it looks potentially serious.
We're talking about allegations of a major cybersecurity issue, maybe even a breach, at the National Labor Relations Board. And there's a reported link to Elon Musk's team.
That's the headline grabber, isn't it?
Definitely. And look, if you're tuning in, you probably want to get the core story quickly, understand what's actually being claimed without wading through, tons of dense reports.
Exactly, and that's what we're aiming for here. A clear look at the core claims.
So our sources for this are primarily a whistleblower complaint. It was made public by Whistleblower Aid.
Right, featuring testimony from an NLRB IT staffer named Daniel Berulis. We've also got reporting from Reuters and NPR adding some context.
Okay, so our mission, if you will, for this deep dive. Let's unpack the key allegations, look at the evidence mentioned so far, and consider what this could all mean.
Let's do it.
All right, the whistleblower himself, Daniel Berulis, he's an IT staffer at the NLRB.
Inside the agency, yeah.
And his main claim is pretty startling. He's alleging that technologists linked to Elon Musk, specifically using the name U.S. DOGE service, were given really, really broad access. Extraordinarily sweeping access is the term used, I think, to the NLRB's computer systems.
Which immediately raises the question, why is that such a big deal? The NLRB systems.
Well, exactly. The NLRB, as Reuters pointed out, is the agency protecting workers' rights to organize, to unionize.
Right. They handle incredibly sensitive case files. Think about ongoing labor disputes, union organizing drives, unfair labor practice claims.
All that confidential stuff, private details, affidavits from workers.
Proprietary business info from companies involved too, potentially, stuff that's very valuable, very sensitive.
And the NLRB, historically, it's been a target, hasn't it, for companies, maybe even specifically Musk, who's publicly clashed with them.
He has. So the idea of anyone getting unusually wide access, especially a group linked to someone who's been critical of the agency, well, it raises serious questions about impartiality and data security.
Okay, so that's the context. Now, what evidence does Berulis actually point to? He says it started around early March. He noticed irregularities, specifically in the logging protocols.
So the digital footprints, basically.
Yeah.
Who accessed what when.
Exactly. And he says these logs look like they'd been tampered with.
Which is a huge red flag in cybersecurity, right? If the logs are altered, it often means someone's trying to hide their activity, cover their tracks.
That's the implication. And then beyond the logs, he claims something else significant happened.
What's that?
The removal of about 10 gigabytes of data directly from the NLRB network.
10 gigabytes. Wow. How unusual is that?
Well, Berulis himself apparently called this kind of direct data removal extremely unusual for their databases. He suggested data doesn't normally just get pulled out like that in bulk.
Okay, so suspicious log activity and a large unusual data removal. That's starting to sound more concrete.
And the type of data. If 10 gigs were taken, what could have been in there? Berulis mentioned some possibilities to Reuters.
Like what?
Proprietary business information from companies, sensitive details on union campaigns, unfair labor practice case info.
Including those private affidavits we mentioned earlier. Sworn statements.
Yes, exactly. Highly confidential material. If that got out, or into the hands of an opposing party in a labor dispute,
it could absolutely tip the scales, undermine negotiations, intimidate workers, give one side a massive unfair advantage. It goes right to the heart of the NLRB's function.
It really puts workers' organizing efforts at risk too, potentially, if people feel their confidential reports aren't safe.
It could definitely create a chilling effect. People might hesitate to come forward.
So Berulis sees these things. Did he try to raise the alarm?
He did. The reports say he and a colleague started investigating these anomalies themselves.
Okay.
And they apparently tried to escalate it. They attempted to alert CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
The Federal Cybersecurity Agency? Makes sense.
But here's a really concerning part of his claim. He alleges that attempt was, and this is a quote, disrupted by higher-ups without explanation.
Disrupted by higher-ups. So someone internally at the NLRB allegedly stopped them from reporting this potential breach to CISA.
That's the allegation, which, adds another layer. Why would that happen if the concerns were legitimate?
It certainly looks suspicious. Okay, what about this Russia connection that's been reported?
Right, this has another twist. Berulis claims that after the period DOGE service had access, in the days following, there were attempted logins to NLRB systems from an IP address in Russia.
From Russia, after this internal access event.
Yes. And apparently, these weren't just random attempts. He told Reuters they used correct usernames and passwords.
Whoa. So valid credentials might have been compromised.
It certainly implies that. Now, thankfully, he says these attempts were blocked. The NLRB seems to have location-based security that stopped logins from Russia.
Like a geofence, basically.
Exactly. But the fact that attempts were made, seemingly with correct credentials, right after the DOGE access,
Yeah.
the timing is, well, it's notable.
It definitely raises questions. How would those credentials get out? Is there a link? We don't know for sure, obviously.
No direct causal link established,
Okay.
but it warrants investigation, absolutely. How did those credentials leak? And why the sudden interest from a Russian IP?
So, with all these allegations flying around, what have the involved parties said? U.S. DOGE service. Musk.
Well, according to the reports we've seen, U.S. DOGE service didn't immediately comment.
Okay. And Senators Cotton and Orner were mentioned in the complaint.
Yes, they were apparently notified by the whistleblower, but initial reports said they also hadn't commented immediately.
What about the NLRB itself? They must have responded.
They did. An NLRB spokesperson, quoted by NPR, flatly disputed Berulis' claims,
Disputed how?
stated quite clearly that there had been no breach of their systems, a direct denial.
So, a complete contradiction to the whistleblower's account?
Pretty much. Which isn't unusual in these early stages. You often get conflicting stories, but it highlights the need for, an independent look at what actually happened.
Leaves us trying to weigh these different accounts. Now, this story also takes a more, frankly, disturbing turn, doesn't it? Beyond just the data.
It does. There are reports of alleged intimidation against Berulis.
What kind of intimidation?
Whistleblower Aid's chief legal counsel reported that Berulis received a threatening note taped to his front door.
The threatening note. That's serious.
And get this, the note apparently included drone photographs of him in his own neighborhood.
Drone photos of him personally, that's chilling. That's direct surveillance and a threat.
Absolutely. It moves way beyond just a digital security issue into potential physical intimidation. Trying to silence him, perhaps?
It raises huge concerns about whistleblower safety.
Definitely. And Berulis himself spoke about this atmosphere. He told Reuters, unlike any other time previously, there is this fear to speak out because of reprisal.
He feels there's a climate of fear now.
Yes. And he expressed concern that sensitive data was taken and that people trying to stop things like this are being, in his words, removed one by one.
Wow. Removed one by one. That's a very strong statement. It really highlights the personal stakes here.
It does. It underscores the pressure whistleblowers can face and why protections are so critical. People need to feel safe reporting potential wrongdoing.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together then. What are the absolute key takeaways so far?
Well, you've got a whistleblower and insider alleging a potentially major cyber incident at the NLRB.
Linked specifically to Elon Musk's U.S. DOGE service technologists getting unusually wide system access.
Right, with supporting claims of tampered logs, a large data removal, 10 gigs.
Sensitive data, possibly compromised union info, company info, affidavits.
Then there's the alleged blocking of attempts to report it to CISA, the federal cybersecurity agency.
Plus that subsequent flurry of attempted logins from Russia using what seemed to be valid credentials.
And finally, these deeply concerning reports of direct intimidation against the whistleblower, including threats and drone surveillance.
But we absolutely have to stress this is still developing.
Absolutely critical point. We have the whistleblower's detailed account on one side.
And a clear denial from the NLRB on the other. No definitive proof publicly available yet, no official investigation conclusions released.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
no firm conclusions right now.
Yeah,
But the allegations themselves are serious enough to demand attention.
they really are, which makes you think about the bigger picture, the potential implications here. I mean, if these claims are proven true, what does that say about the security of sensitive government data, especially data related to workers' rights?
It would be a huge blow to the integrity of the labor relations process. And it raises broader questions about, the power dynamics between big tech, corporate interests, and labor organizations.
And the vulnerability of the systems designed to mediate those conflicts.
Precisely. And what about whistleblower protection? This case, especially with the intimidation claims, really puts a spotlight on whether those protections are adequate when powerful interests might be involved.
It's that intersection of technology, labor law, corporate power. It's complex.
Very much so. It touches on trust in institutions, data security in a digital age, and the fundamental right for workers to organize without fear of their confidential information being compromised or used against them.
So for anyone listening who wants to keep track of this, what's the best way?
Keep an eye on the news outlets that broke this story and are following it, like Reuters and NPR. They'll likely have updates as more information comes out, or if investigations proceed.
Definitely worth following. It's a significant story with potentially far-reaching consequences.
Indeed. And maybe one final thought to leave people with, beyond just this specific case.
Yeah.
What does it mean for all of us if the very systems set up to protect rights, like the right to organize, become vulnerable points themselves? What happens when the watchdog's own house might not be secure?
That's a sobering question, something important to consider as this unfolds.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.